It was the kind of night where everything felt wrong, where every sound was amplified and every movement seemed like a warning. I was working the graveyard shift at a truck depot, a lonely job. Especially when you're stuck in a dimly lit office with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of trucks idling. But that night, something changed. Something followed us. The clock on the wall clicked over to 11:30 p.m. as I sat back in my office chair, half drowsy. I wasn't the only one in the depot. There were 4 of us, working the graveyard shift together. It was me, a guy named Mike, a young woman named Rachel, and Ben, who had worked here longer than all of us. We passed the time by chatting, telling stories to stay awake. Some of them were funny, some were sad, but one by one, the stories started to take a turn. Tonight, though, something was different. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a feeling none of us could shake. Maybe it was the cold. Or maybe it was because the wind had picked up, making the depot feel isolated and eerie. But whatever it was, I had no idea that by the end of the night, we would all wish we had stayed in bed. We were all gathered around the small table in the break room, sipping on lukewarm coffee and trying to make the night go by faster. The hum of the trucks outside was the only thing breaking the silence. The cold air seemed to slip in through the cracks in the walls, and I couldn't help but shiver. It was as if the world outside had frozen, leaving us isolated in this small building. I was telling a story about a haunted house I visited when Mike interrupted me with a nervous chuckle. You know what would be even creepier? If the ghosts were real and they started following us around, messing with us like they were watching us the whole time. The room fell quiet. Ben, who usually didn't buy into any of that supernatural stuff, gave a skeptical smirk. What do you mean? Like someone is here with us right now? Mike shrugged. Exactly. What if it's one of us who ends up dead? And none of us ever saw it coming. Rachel let out a laugh, but it was hollow, nervous. You're starting to scare me, Mike. You really think that would happen? I could see the unease spreading through the group. It was the perfect time for Ben to throw in one of his usual stories to lighten the mood. But instead, he leaned forward, staring at the ground, his voice a low whisper. Actually, you might not be too far off. We all turned to look at him. Ben never spoke like this. He was always the tough guy, the one who didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything that couldn't be explained away. But tonight, there was something different about him. Ben took a long breath before speaking again. A long time ago, there were rumors about this place. People say the old depot had a history that no one really talks about anymore. Before the truck company bought it, it was a warehouse for goods, and a lot of people worked here. But not everyone left. Some of them stayed. We all grew silent as he spoke, the temperature in the room suddenly colder. It wasn't just the air. It felt like the walls were pressing in on us, like we were being watched. Ben continued. The stories say that sometimes when the workers got too tired, they started hearing things, footsteps, whispers, shadows moving in the corners of their vision. At first, they thought it was just exhaustion. But the thing is, these hallucinations always started to happen at the same time every night, like the spirits were waiting for them to slip into a vulnerable state. The clock on the wall ticked louder. The only sound in the room. Everyone sat still, as though we were afraid to move. The story hung in the air, a heavy silence following it. Rachel broke the silence, shifting uncomfortably in her chair. Okay, I'm not sure if this is some joke, but that's not funny, Ben. You can't just. Before she could finish her sentence, the lights flickered above us. The kind of flicker that made you jump, the kind that felt unnatural. Then, The radio in the corner of the room crackled to life, playing static before it suddenly cut off. Everyone froze. I was about to say something when I heard it, a faint scratching sound. It came from the hallway leading to the garage. It was the kind of sound that made the hairs on your neck stand up like someone dragging their nails against the wall. "Did you hear that?" Mike whispered, his voice trembling. We all nodded, our eyes wide with unease. Ben stood up slowly, his face pale. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Just the building settling." But his words felt hollow, and no one believed him. It wasn't the building. We all knew it. Mike stood up as well, his hands shaking. "I'm not staying here. I'm going outside for a minute." Before anyone could stop him, Mike bolted for the door. We followed him as he rushed into the hallway, our footsteps echoing through the quiet depot. We reached the main garage, where the trucks were parked, their engines softly humming. But when we got there, something was wrong. The garage door, which had been closed just moments ago, was now wide open, a cold breeze sweeping through. And then we heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the distance, coming closer. The chill in the air was unbearable now. Rachel grabbed my arm. "What is that? Who's there?" But when we looked around, there was no one. The footsteps kept coming, closer and closer, until they were right behind us. We turned around, but there was nothing there. "Okay, this is freaking me out," Rachel said, her voice rising. "We need to get out of here. Now." But just as we started to move toward the exit, the lights went out. "Complete darkness," Mike screamed, his voice echoing in the silence. "Guys, I swear I saw something. There's someone in here with us." Suddenly, a loud bang rang through the building like something heavy had been dropped. A flash of light illuminated the room for a second, and I saw a figure standing near the far wall. A tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes. Its presence sent a shockwave of terror through me. The figure was standing still, watching us. We all backed away slowly, not knowing what to do. My heart was racing in my chest, my breath coming in short, frantic gasps. Then the figure moved, slowly at first, then faster, its footsteps echoing around the room. "Who are you?" Ben demanded, his voice shaking. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it started to mimic our every move. As we walked, it walked. When we stopped, it stopped. The temperature in the room dropped further, and I could see my breath. And then, just like that, it spoke. "Story. I remember." The voice was faint, cold, distant, like it was coming from far away, but it was also right in our ears. Panic set in as we realized the ghost wasn't just mimicking us. It was repeating the stories we had told. Every word we had said earlier in the night was now coming to life. The figure stepped closer, its face still obscured by the darkness, but I could hear its breath, deep and labored. "Your story, Ben. I remember." Ben froze. No, that's not possible." But it was too late. The figure lunged forward, its hand reaching out to grab him. Ben screamed, his body jerking as though he was being pulled into the shadows. "Ben!" Rachel shouted, reaching for him, but it was as if he was already gone. In a blur of motion, the lights came back on, and the figure was gone. Ben was gone too, swallowed by the darkness. The remaining three of us stood there, stunned, unable to move. The door slammed shut behind us, and the temperature dropped even further. The only sound was the hum of the trucks outside, like nothing had ever happened. But we all knew the truth. The stories weren't just stories anymore. They were real, and now we were trapped in them. We didn't know what would happen next, but as we looked at the empty space where Ben had been, we all knew one thing. We had become part of the story. If you want to hear more terrifying tales like this, where the line between reality and nightmares blurs, check out the next video on my channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the stories we tell come to life.